The veteran's name is John B. McIntyre.
Right.
He was born February 2nd, 1922. He served in the Army during World War II. He achieved the rank of Staff Sergeant. We are recording this on March 31st, 2014. My name is Austin Mall. I'm conducting the interview, and I have no relation to Mr. McIntyre. Mr. McIntyre, first, thank you very much for inviting me to your home and taking the time to meet with Clemson students and keeping up with your university, your alumni, your alma mater. Go ahead and start. Tell me a little bit about life growing up for you. Where were you born?
I was born just outside of Spartanburg in Arcadia, South Carolina.
And what was life like growing up in Spartanburg? Did you have any siblings or anything?
There's 9 children in my family. There's 7 of us still living, and all 7 is 80 and above.
So I imagine growing up with 8 other siblings, you always had someone to play with?
Oh yes, oh yes. Yeah, we, I have a sister 94 now. Well, she'll be 94 in May. I have another sister that's 90. I have a sister that'll be 88 tomorrow, April the 1st. I have a brother 86, and I have a brother 84, and the baby's 80. All 7 are 80 and above.
Were you the oldest?
I was the 3rd child out of 9.
Okay. So you got to have a little responsibility watching over the younger siblings, and
Right.
you had a few older siblings.
Yeah.
That's great. How'd you decide to go to, or we'll start off. What happened that led you into Clemson, and was that after or before your time in World War II?
Actually, I couldn't have gone if it hadn't been for the GI Bill. I went to Clemson under the GI Bill. My dad worked in the cotton mill, and he couldn't afford to. I was actually a high school dropout. I stayed in, I dropped out of high school in the 11th grade. There was only 11th grade at that time. I should have finished high school in 1939, but I graduated in 1941.
How important was it for you to go back and finish high school?
Well, I just decided to go back. It just, I didn't have any particular reason, I don't guess. But I went, and I worked in the mill on the 2nd shift and went to high school.
What was...
The reason I dropped out was to help my dad. He raised 9 children. Yeah.
Were your other siblings working also?
No, I had a sister and a brother that was working. Yeah. Yeah. And we, when then World War II broke out in spring, December 7th, 1941, and I enlisted in the Army. I volunteered in 1942.
Do you remember December 7th,
Oh yes,
1941?
very much so.
And what was the reaction? What were you doing, or what?
Well, there's several of us boys already kind of palled around with each other, and we were in Spartanburg, the city of Spartanburg, and we heard it, it was kind of a shock to us, yeah, because we was all just the right age to go in the Army. I was 19 at that time. And I was 20 when I went in the Army, and my dad had to sign for me. He signed for me, and I went down to Fort Jackson, stayed a few days, and got all my shots and everything down there. And I went to Fort McClellan, Alabama, and stayed there about 6 weeks. And then I went to Camp Claiborne, Louisiana.
You said your parents signed, or your father signed for you.
To go in.
Were your parents supportive of you enlisting?
Well, my dad, but they're both hesitant, but they knew that I was going to have to go in. At my age, I was just the right age. And my dad was a veteran of World War I. He served in Europe, World War I. He was in the 30th Division, 118th Infantry, headquarters company. There's a picture of him on the wall up there. And if you know history, you'll find that what ended the war, World War I, was when the 30th Division broke the Hindenburg Line. And that's when the Germans surrendered.
Yeah. And your father was over there?
My dad stayed over 11 months. My dad was a blacksmith. He was a big husky man, not a fat man, just muscles. And they chose him to train to be a blacksmith. And he told me one time that he would take 11 horses and mules to the front lines every morning, pick up 20 more and bring them back, put shoes on them, take them back, continuous to do that every day. Yeah.
That doesn't sound easy.
Yeah. My name, the B in my name, comes from a World War I hero. His name was John Belton White. And he got the Distinguished Service Cross for his action in World War I. And that's who I was named after.
When you went down for your training, was it more difficult, or was it as difficult as you thought it would be?
No, it wasn't too bad. I went in and 4 months I was a corporal. And three weeks later, I was a buck sergeant. And I kind of dished it out instead of having to take it. And I stayed a buck sergeant. Now, a buck sergeant at that time was a squad sergeant. I had about 13 men in my squad. And we went up to camp I'll think of it in a minute. But we left that camp in New York and went overseas. And I landed in Scotland July the 1st, 1943. And being in the engineers, we started building toilets and kitchens to get to provide the, I'd say latrines instead of toilets. We started building those, and the troop would come in and stay in tents. It was going to make the invasion. And we did that for about a year. And after the year after the invasion of Normandy, we were in Wales. And we left Wales and went down to Southampton and went across the channel, and I landed on Utah Beach, not on D-Day. And I want to emphasize that because I don't want to take the credit for that. And we started taking up mines and booby traps on the beaches, and there were some utility poles buried in the beaches, and at an angle pointing out to the channel, and big shells, probably 2.5 feet long, had a big shell. No, the utility poles were probably 6 feet long, and had a utility shell strapped to them with a cap in the front of them would hit the tanks as they came in. And it's our job to go in and defuse those shells and haul them off and blow them up.
Was that difficult, being able to find these mines?
Well, we had a, now this was utility, on the utility pole, they were visible.
Okay.
After the tide went out, they were visible. But we had to take a mine sweeper and find, there's some buried in the beach. We'd take a mine sweeper and find them.
Was that stressful?
A little bit, yeah.
Now, you weren't there on...
Well, let me back up just a little bit. The platoon sergeant, which there were 3 squads in the platoon, where the weather in England, he couldn't take that weather, and they found out he had tuberculosis. So they shipped him home. And then I was elected to be, out of the 3, I was elected to be the platoon sergeant. So I was, and that was a staff sergeant. And that's what I remained until I came home.
Did you enjoy watching over, or I don't know how the position worked as staff sergeant or platoon sergeant, but did you have certain men who were under your command or who you have to watch over? We
had about 42 men, 43, something, about that number, yeah. And we served, took up the mines and booby traps, and then we followed the Third Army a good ways. Then they pulled us out of the Third Army, and after the southern France was liberated, we pulled us out and we went down to Marseille and started building a camp to get the troops out of Europe. We was going to send them down through the Mediterranean Sea, down through the Suez Canal, into the Red Sea, into the Japanese theater. Of course, when they dropped the bomb, that ended all of that. And they used that camp as a debarkation center to get the troops home. And I left there, and I left there November the 19th, 1945. Came up to Camp Shanks, New York. That's the name of the camp that I left from. And came down to Fort Bragg, and I was discharged at Fort Bragg December the 6th, 1945.
Going back real quickly to your time in Europe, and then we get to after World War II. what'd you do, if you remember, in your free time, when you weren't working or when you're spending time with your fellow men? How'd you keep up camaraderie?
Well, after the war was over with?
Or during the war, even when you were out there, if you weren't always, doing something, building a camp.
Well, they had to supervise. Yeah, yeah, and of course we were a good ways away from the front lines then. During the Battle of the Bulge, of course the Germans, they penetrated several miles into the American and English troops, and we went on alert at that time that we were going to move out, but the weather cleared up and the Air Force came in and bombed the Germans, and of course they had to retreat, and we didn't have to go. That was it started December the 6th, 1940. December the 16th, 1945. And after that, after the short period of time, that's when they moved us down to Marseille.
Now, before you moved down to Marseille and you were sweeping up Normandy Beach,
we were still checking places for mines and booby traps. Not on the beach. Yeah.
But just moving through that area, and you weren't there on D-Day, but even so, it's tough for me to relate to. I hear all about D-Day. I mean, I'm 21 years old, but for you, you being there, being able to see the aftermath much sooner than what we can see today. What does it mean to you?
Well, I was 21 years old. No, I was 22 years old. 22 years old when I landed on Utah Beach as a platoon sergeant. And of course you're responsible for those men. And we were supposed to go into a little town of St. Malo, not St. Lo, but St. Malo, which was a little coastal town, had docks and everything. And we were going in to rebuild St. Malo where the ships could come in at St. Malo. Cherbourg had not been taken at that time. But the infantry had bypassed St. Malo, and when they did, they shot up our equipment, shelled our equipment, and I remember one boy talking about jumping off of a road grader and just left it sitting there and ran when they started shelling. Yeah. And of course we didn't go into St. Malo. We went on up to Brest, and Brest was so torn up and everything, we didn't even try to rebuild it or anything. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add from your time in World War II? Because we've gotten to December 6, 1945 is when you were discharged, but you came back on November 1945. But any other comments you have, or memories from your time over in Europe during World War II?
Well, the biggest memory I've got is coming home. When I went overseas, I went on to Queen Mary, and that's just like floating a big city across the ocean. And coming home, I was on a little Liberty ship, and I was seasick for 10 days.
No fun?
No fun. Excuse me just a minute.
Oh, go ahead. What do you have?
This is a book was written by one of our lady in our church. It's about all the World War II veterans. Yeah. And that's my write-up right there. If you read these first few sentences here, you could see what I said about being seasick.
Pierre. That's funny.
Yeah, and there's a picture of me when I was on R&R. I was down on the French Riviera when that was made. Now that's a copy of that picture on the wall over there. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'd love to take a look at that article or get a copy of that book.
Beg pardon?
I'd love to get a copy of that book from.
Well, I can get you a copy of it for $15.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah. I'll give you this one, but this is.
No, that one's special.
Well, this is autographed by the author.
Thank you. Fantastic.
But some of those people had it a lot worse than I had it. I don't want to go through it again, and I don't want my son to go through it. But this is very interesting.
Okay.
It's got it separated from up to the Vietnam War. Got not only, I said all of World War II. I think it's got some. Well, even Desert Storm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's recent.
Here's a guy that was a nurse in Desert Storm. Yeah.
From your church?
Yeah, from my church, and he wrote more than anybody else did. He'd being a nurse. Yeah.
So eventually, did you get over the sickness while you were on the boat? Or
Well,
the Liberty ship?
we were probably out in the middle of the ocean, and I was on the bottom. The bunks were like this here. It's one on top of each other, about 5 high. And I was on the bottom one because what made you so sick when there's not anything in your stomach to come up. And they brought me, I had a little boy in my platoon, they brought me saltine crackers. And that's all I ate for 10 days. And they told me, said Sergeant, said you get up on the deck and let that cold air hit you in the face. And all said you'll be all right. So I climbed out and went up the stair ladder. And when I got up there, I had to go through a latrine, and they was laying around up there like dead flies. I wasn't the only one sick. There must have been 100 of them lying around, and it's I tell you, it's something else.
Yeah. I bet that wasn't that encouraging to make you feel better.
Well,
you see her.
When we got into New York, well, we were several miles out. All the lights of New York was on, and I did make my way out to get out to see all the lights and everything. We sailed up the Hudson River about, 20 miles or so where Camp Shanks was located. That's quite an experience.
Yeah, were the big lights new? I mean, for someone from Spartanburg, South Carolina.
Oh yeah. I had never been out. I had been to Columbia one time, and that's as far as I'd been away from home.
Now, what was it like when you actually got back to port and you departed from the ship? And then did you head immediately back down to
Fort Bragg.
Fort Bragg?
No, there's some delay there. We landed in Camp Shanks November the 28th. And I was discharged November the 6th. I was discharged December the 6th. So that's how long it took to get my papers and everything. And a boy from Asheville was with me, and we went to the bus station to catch a bus early in the mornings, and they told us the bus didn't leave until 5 o'clock that afternoon. So we said, let's go hitchhike. And he and I hitchhiked, and we caught a ride with a man that was going just a few miles out of Fort Bragg. He was going to Greenville, South Carolina. And he brought me right by my home, and just outside of Spartanburg. And I got home about 10 o'clock that night, December the 6th. Yeah.
What was it like when you're discharged out of the Army? Was it a relief? Were you happy to be home? What were your parents?
I kind of felt like a black fella said. He was in line getting his discharge also. And he handed him that discharge, and he replied, said, I've looked all over the world for this thing, and says, here it was at Fort Bragg all the time. And that's the way both of us felt. I did run in one of my cousins at Fort Bragg I hadn't seen in several years. I lack from, I was home February 1942. And I got home again December the 6th, 1945. And that's a couple of months, been away from home 3 years. Yeah.
What were you going to do now that you're out of the Army?
Well, I went back to work in the mill.
Okay.
Yeah, and I worked in the mill 2 years, and I decided if I was going to get ahead, I'd better get some more education, and that's when I decided to go to Clemson. So I entered Clemson in fall of 1947. And spring of 1948, I made the baseball team.
Okay. What position did you play?
I was played third base, and I was I had enrolled at Spartanburg Methodist College, and they kicked me off the team. Had to stay out a year because I had enrolled at another college. So I was left the team in Clemson, and I went home on the weekends and played textile baseball. And I did fool with it playing at Clemson anymore. I always went home and played textile ball on the weekend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in your time at Clemson, you decided to be a textile management major. I read that somewhere.
No, I was a textile major, because that was probably one of the most popular courses at that time at Clemson. Yeah, it was very popular. Yeah.
How important was it to you to get your college degree? I read somewhere that you're the first in your family to get a college degree.
Well, I was the first and only one. Yeah. Yeah. That's in that article that you saw.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah.
But was that that must have been a big deal in your family?
Well, it was. Yeah. My mother had passed away at that time, and my dad was real proud. Yeah.
Good. Now, in your time at Clemson, I'm sure you've been back, but I'm sure a lot has also changed.
Oh yeah, there were 3,500 students when I was there. And it was a military school. There was a split about half cadets and half veterans. The veterans did not have to take the military.
Okay.
And of course we enjoyed seeing the cadets have to snap to it.
Physical training and such,
Yeah.
up early in the mornings.
Yeah, and they had to march in the dining room. And they stood at attention until all came in, and they all sat down at the same time. And we had to dining hall by ourselves. The veterans did. Yeah.
Now, Clemson's a little different now because we have civilians and ROTC.
And women.
And women,
Yeah.
that's right. But what were some of the benefits that you saw in the order of things? Waking up all at the same time for physical training, or...
Well, it didn't bother me any.
Okay.
No, it didn't bother me any. Of course, a lot of times I had a 8 o'clock class. Yeah. And we went to school on Saturday. I've had classes on Saturday. 4-hour lab on Saturday. Yeah.
Wow.
So you don't have class on Saturday now.
No.
That's another big difference.
We have football games on Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, of course, we had football game on Saturday too, but I think they started at 2 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any memories from your time at Clemson before moving over to, what was the other school? Textile?
No, not in particular. What was real interesting to me recently, we had a professor at Clemson. He taught textile costing, and his nickname was Speedball.
Speedball?
Speedball. And he told you at the first day of school to have plenty of sharpened pencils. If you break your point and have to go to the pencil sharpener, you got 2 weeks behind. And that's why they called him Speedball. But I was at a meeting of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes at Clemson 2 or 3 weeks ago, and a man came up to me, and I noticed his name, don't remember what his first name was, but his name was Campbell. And he said his daddy came to teach at Clemson in 1938. I said, "You're not Speedball's son, are you?"
What did he say?
He said, "Yes, I am."
That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, he invited me to come sit with him. Sure did. We had a good conversation.
That's
Sure
good.
did.
That's good.
Yeah.
What did you do after Clemson then?
I went back to work at the mill I grew up in, and
Was it hard working there? Tough work? What kind of work?
well, some of it was tough work, but I mean, any job you got, you have to work at it. Yeah, and I worked myself up at the mill where I grew up in to supervisor. I was a supervisor, and they transferred me to Easley. They owned the mill here in Easley, and I was overseer of weaving here at Easley. And Draper Corporation came by and offered me a job, and I left the mill and went to work with Draper. I stayed with Draper 11 years. And at that time, after I left Draper, I opened my own business. And I retired when I was 79.
Did you enjoy working for yourself?
Oh yes, yeah. I paid more taxes my first 6 months than I made working as a salary, working for somebody else. Yeah.
Good. Now, you mentioned you have a son, and you also showed me a picture of your beautiful wife when we walked in. Could you, if you would be so kind, go through how you two met, and also your family, your son, what he's doing now, or your relations?
I went to Wofford Summer School, and my wife was going to Duke at that time. And come up and somebody wanted me to have a blind date with a girl, and they told me who it was, and I know who she was, but she didn't know who she was going out with, and that's how we met. And we started dating while she was going to Converse. And when she graduated from Converse, she started teaching high school, where I graduated from high school. And she taught high school there, and they wanted to start a veterans program of textiles in the high school where I graduated. And they asked me to help buy the machinery and set the program up, which I did. And I worked 4 hours a night after I got out of the mill, and I made more money in those 4 hours than my wife made teaching school. And she quit teaching. And that time we had a little girl. The little girl came first, and she was about 4 years old, 3 or 4 years old at that time, and she was about 5 when we moved to Easley, and we were married November the 10th, 1951. She had graduated from Converse in 1950.
Okay.
Of course, I graduated Clemson in 1951. We married right after that. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So you have a daughter and a son?
I got a daughter and a son.
Congratulations.
The daughter is now 60. My son is 46. There's 14 years between our children. And my daughter would always write Santa Claus a letter wanting a little brother or little sister for Christmas. So my wife found out she was pregnant in November, and she wrapped a little gift up and put it on the Christmas tree, and I put a note on it, said save this until July, and you will have a little brother or a little sister. And when she read that, she jumped sky high and started crying, so happy.
Yeah.
Ran down next door and showed that to the neighbors. They started crying, and she came back home and got on the telephone, called everybody in town, and she was so happy about it. And she turned 14 May the 5th, and he was born July the 10th. And he was a blessing to us.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
She graduated from Furman and went on to the University of Louisville and got her graduate work. And my son graduated from Presbyterian College, and he went to American University in Washington, D.C., and got his graduate work. Now, you mentioned a while ago your dad about public policy.
Yeah.
That's what he got his master's degree in public policy and psychology.
Okay.
And he worked for the American Psychological Association in Washington, D.C. for 15 years. And he is now working with public television. My daughter wound up teaching psychology in a little Baptist college in Rome, Georgia. Name of it was Shorter. Are you
I'm familiar. There's a lot of schools around Rome. There's like Shorter. I think Barry's near there.
Barry, Shorter and Barry.
Yeah.
Barry is the largest campus in the United States, or probably the world. 28,000 acres.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Now, I can't finish this or getting to know you without talking about your cooking, because your cooking is what has led me to you through that Clemson World article.
Yeah.
Do you still cook, and how important is it to you, and what do you like to cook?
I cook anything I want to. I can really tear up a German chocolate cake. Man, it is. And in fact, my Sunday school class, he's sick and can't come to Sunday school, and I baked him a German chocolate the other day, took it to him, and I take I don't know whether I can put my hands on it right quick or not. I might
Take
be
your time.
might be able to.
Cook at 81.
That's the Spartanburg paper.
Okay.
Now this is the Greenville paper here. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
My my wife had Parkinson's disease for 10 years,
Okay.
and she got where she couldn't go. I mean, couldn't handle stuff,
Yeah.
and she fell and bruised up her knee, and the doctors put her in a nursing home for rehab. She was over there 2 months, and I didn't like it, and she didn't either. And I told her that I'd take her home and take care of herself, which I did.
Yeah.
And she says, "Who's going to cook?" I said, "I'll learn how." And I did. I learned how to cook, and I had a talent I didn't know I had.
There you go.
Yeah.
You learned new talents at the age of 81.
Yeah, yeah, and I still cook up for family down. If somebody gets sick, in case I cook a meal, take it to them. Still do that.
Awesome.
Yeah. 2007. You ever heard of Paula Dean?
Yep. Yes.
Well, I won her national contest. Got to go to Atlanta and be on her show. Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
sure did.
Well,
You asked me about my son.
yes, sir.
Here's an article about him.
Wow.
You know who that is he's shaking hands with?
Al Gore. Wow.
He was vice president at that time. He's done well.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. Let me tell you a little something about that right there. When that came out in the Green, my wife had passed away, and it tells in there about her passing away. And that came out in the Greenville paper that night, that very night. Telephone rang about 8 o'clock, and this woman was on the telephone. Said, "Are you Mr. McIntyre?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." She said, "Well, you don't know me, and I don't know you, but I just wondered if you needed a companion."
A man who can cook.
Now that actually happened.
Oh, wow.
Now the lady that lives next door here
Yeah.
came to me, and there's a veterinarian lives up the street here, and his wife had passed away about 3 months before my wife did.
Mhm.
And she said, this particular woman here lives in Easley, big old fat, silly woman. Said she was ready to go out for dinner any time. And I just told her to tell her that I wasn't interested in going out with anybody.
Yeah.
But the man up the street said it'd be a cold day in hell when he went out with her.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a funny story.
yeah, yeah.
Good for you.
I got some. You want to see my discharge?
Yes, sir.
You told me
Yes.
to.
Yeah, it would help me get some biographical information when we're done.
That's what they gave me in Washington. And this is what the American Legion gave me. I have to think about something here. I might be able to.
That's fine. Now let me we can just wrap up real quick, and you can show me this, but we can go ahead and turn the camera off. My last, I guess, unless you have anything you'd like to add, any memories, any such that you want recorded for the Library of Congress, but the last thing I'd like to add is, in serving, we're preserving this for those who serve, but also anything you'd like to add in the importance of serving your country and what that means to you.
Well, it means the world to me. Sure does. Now, I went back over there for the 65th anniversary of D-Day. And that meant a lot to me. And took my two children with me.
Okay.
And my son had been to Europe several times, but my daughter never had been. And he my son fixed this up for us. Now the first part of it is when we were in Paris. Now that's a V letter. It's that's a man that was down in the Pacific, and he mailed that to my mother and daddy. Right there. See, they made photographs instead of taking it. That's what they call V-mail.
Did you enjoy this trip back over?
Oh yeah.
Versailles, right?
Now we tried to go in Notre Dame. That's Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether you remember or not, but a plane crashed going from Brazil to Paris, out about 200 miles out in the ocean. And they was having a memorial service in Notre Dame at that time. We couldn't go in there. Now that we own the beaches there now.
Wow.
And that's where they interviewed me. That's a United Associated Press interviewing me on the beach.
Well, cool. Let me turn this off and we can go.
Huh?
Let me turn this off and we can go through a few more of these.
All right.
Go ahead.